Phoenix, Arizona, a city of sun, sprawling desert landscapes. It's a place where life is lived outdoors. People enjoy the warmth. People enjoy the clear skies. People enjoy the quiet beauty of the region. But in the early 1990s, a shadow fell over this sun-drenched city. Darkness crept along the city's network of canals. Those man-made rivers bring life-giving water to the arid land. These canals were usually places of peace. People walked their dogs there. Children rode their bikes. It was part of the city's charm, a place for quiet reflection, a place for a leisurely stroll on a warm evening. This sense of peace was shattered. Suddenly, these familiar waterways became places of dread. The story begins not with a loud bang, but with a quiet, chilling discovery. It was a horror that seemed to come from nowhere, staining Phoenix with a deep, dark red. The community would soon learn a predator was moving among them, silent and unseen. He used the very canals that sustained the city as his hunting ground, turning paths of life into trails of death and despair for families. The first whispers of trouble started in 1992. A young woman, just starting her life, disappeared. Then another. The pattern was horrifyingly similar. They were found near the canals, their lives brutally cut short. The city held its breath, hoping it was an isolated incident. But the fear was real, and it grew with each passing day. The police were baffled. The clues were scarce. The killer seemed to emerge from the shadows and vanish back into them, leaving behind only questions and unimaginable grief. What no one knew then was that this was just the beginning. The killer was patient. He was methodical. He moved through the city like a ghost, leaving a trail of terror that would haunt Phoenix for decades. The investigation became one of the most complex and frustrating in the state's history. For years, the identity remained a mystery, a phantom that instilled deep, lasting fear. The sun still shone, but a permanent shadow lingered by the water's edge. Years would pass before a name was attached to the fear. That name was Brian Patrick Miller. But long before he was known as a killer, he was known by another name, a peculiar and unsettling nickname. People in his circle called him the Zombie Hunter. He cultivated this persona with dedication. He would often be seen in public wearing full costume armor. He would often be seen carrying fake weapons. He would often be seen driving a customized police car with Zombie Hunter decals plastered on the side. He was a fixture at local comic conventions. He was a fixture at fantasy events, a big personality who seemed to be living out a strange, harmless fantasy. To many, he was just an eccentric local character. A bit odd, perhaps, but not dangerous. He loved zombies and sci-fi, immersing himself in a world of make-believe. This public image was his camouflage, a carefully constructed mask that hid the horrifying reality of who he truly was, posing for pictures with smiling fans, participating in parades. Meanwhile, a much darker side remained completely hidden from view. This persona allowed him to move through society without suspicion. The nickname itself was a chilling piece of misdirection. He claimed to hunt the undead, fictional monsters from movies and comic books. But the truth was far more terrifying. The real monsters were not zombies, they were the demons inside his own mind. The hunting he did was not for fantasy creatures, but for real, living people. He preyed on the vulnerable. He preyed on young women who were simply trying to live their lives. The Zombie Hunter persona was not just a hobby, it was a shield, a clever disguise that allowed a predator to walk in plain sight. This duality is what makes the case so profoundly disturbing. How can someone so public, so open about unusual interests, harbor such a dark secret? It challenges our perception of what a monster looks like. We expect them to lurk in shadows, to be reclusive, visibly menacing. Brian Patrick Miller was the opposite. He was out in the open, performing for crowds, smiling for cameras. The Zombie Hunter wasn't just a nickname, it was a deception that allowed a real-life monster to operate for years without anyone ever guessing the truth. The timeline of the attack sent waves of panic through the Phoenix community. The first victim, Angela Brasso, was found in November 1992. She was 22 years old, a vibrant young woman with her whole life ahead of her. She had gone for a bike ride along the canal and never came home. Her death was brutal, and it left the city reeling. People were urged to be cautious, to not travel alone near the canals, especially after dark. The initial shock soon gave way to a gnawing fear that this might not be the last time such a tragedy would occur. That fear proved to be tragically well-founded. Less than a year later, in September 1993, another young woman, 17-year-old Melanie Bernas, disappeared. Like Angela, she was also riding her bike near the canal system. Her body was later discovered in the water, confirming the city's worst fears. A serial killer was at work. The connection was undeniable. Two young women, both near the canals, both attacked in a similar savage manner. The term canal murders was born, and it became synonymous with the terror that now held Phoenix in its grip. The investigation became a massive undertaking. Detectives worked tirelessly, chasing down every possible lead, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed. They interviewed hundreds of people and collected evidence from the crime scenes, but the killer was elusive. He left behind very little, almost as if he were a ghost. The case grew cold, but the fear did not. For years, the canal murders remained an open wound for the city. Every time a story about the case appeared in the news, the anxiety and the unanswered questions would resurface for everyone. This period of uncertainty lasted for more than 2 decades. An entire generation grew up in Phoenix, hearing the cautionary tales about the canals. Parents warned their children to stay away. The community waited, hoping for a breakthrough, for justice, for an end to the mystery that had haunted them for so long. The killer, meanwhile, was living among them, hidden in plain sight, protected by his strange public persona and the simple passage of time. The city of Phoenix was left to wonder if the monster who stalked their waterways would ever be caught. For over 2 decades, the case files for the canal murders gathered dust, a testament to a long and frustrating investigation. The DNA evidence collected from the crime scenes of both Angela Brasso and Melanie Bernas was the one tangible link to the killer, a silent witness waiting for technology to catch up. For years, that DNA sat in the CODIS database, a lonely digital fingerprint with no match. In the 2010s, a revolutionary new field began to emerge: forensic genealogy. This groundbreaking technique combined traditional DNA analysis, public consumer ancestry databases, offering a new path to justice. This new science provided a glimmer of hope for cold cases long considered unsolvable. Instead of needing a direct match in a criminal database, investigators could now use the killer's DNA to find distant relatives who had submitted their own DNA. By building out family trees from these distant cousins, detectives could painstakingly work down the branches to identify a potential suspect. It was complex and meticulous, but offered the first real chance in 20 years to name the ghost who had haunted Phoenix. In 2014, Phoenix cold case detectives took the leap. They submitted the unknown DNA profile to a lab specializing in forensic genealogy. It was a long shot, a novel approach still proving itself. Detectives knew it might lead to another dead end, but the victims' families had waited long enough. They owed it to Angela and Melanie to pursue every avenue, no matter how unconventional. The hope. Somewhere in a vast sea of genetic data, a distant relative had uploaded their profile, unknowingly providing the key. The waiting began anew, this time with anticipation. Not passive CODIS waiting, but an active scientific hunt. Experts cross-referenced the killer's genetic markers with public databases searching for any familial link, no matter how remote. This new hope in science was the last best chance to solve the mystery. After 22 years of silence and dead ends, technology gave a new voice to the evidence about to whisper the killer's family name to detectives. With Brian Patrick Miller identified as a strong person of interest, the investigation kicked into high gear. But detectives needed more than just a name from a family tree. They needed a direct DNA match. They needed Miller's DNA to compare against the evidence from the crime scenes. To get it, they had to be clever. They couldn't just walk up and ask for a sample, as that would alert him and potentially give him an opportunity to flee or destroy evidence. Instead, they placed him under covert surveillance, watching his every move, waiting for the right opportunity to collect a discarded DNA sample without him knowing. The opportunity came in an incredibly mundane setting. Undercover officers followed Miller to a local restaurant. They watched him have a meal and then leave. As soon as he was gone, an officer moved in and collected the drinking cup he had used. It was a simple, discarded piece of trash, but to the investigators, it was potential gold. They carefully bagged the cup and rushed it to the crime lab for analysis. This was the moment of truth. After 22 years, they were on the verge of knowing for sure if the man who called himself the Zombie Hunter was the same man who had terrorized their city. The lab results came back, and they were conclusive. The DNA from the cup was a perfect match to the DNA found at the crime scene of Angela Brasso. The DNA from the cup was a perfect match to the DNA found at the crime scene of Melanie Bernis. It was the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. Brian Patrick Miller, the eccentric local character, the man who dressed up in costumes, the man who drove a zombie hunter car, was the canal killer. The mask had finally been ripped away, revealing the monster underneath. Their persistence, combined with cutting-edge science, had finally paid off. In January 2015, more than 22 years after the murder of Angela Brasso, the police made their move. A heavily armed SWAT team descended on Brian Patrick Miller's home. He was taken into custody without incident. His life as a public performer and a secret predator brought to an abrupt and definitive end. The news of his arrest sent shockwaves through Phoenix. The faceless boogeyman who had haunted the canals for a generation finally had a name and a face. And it was a face that many in the community had seen before, hiding in plain sight. The path to a trial for Brian Patrick Miller proved to be incredibly long and complex. The legal process began to crawl at a painfully slow pace, filled with delays, motions, and lengthy hearings. Finally, in 2022, a judge ruled that Brian Patrick Miller was competent to stand trial. In April 2023, after hearing all the evidence, the judge delivered his verdict. He found Brian Patrick Miller guilty on all counts. A few months later, in June 2023, Brian Patrick Miller was sentenced to death. The sentence brought a formal end to one of the most terrifying chapters in Phoenix history. But the scars remain. The case of the zombie hunter serves as a chilling reminder that monsters are not always obvious. They can hide behind friendly faces, bizarre personas. For the city of Phoenix, the canals will forever be tied to the memory of Angela, Melanie, and to the man who stalked those waterways, a real-life monster hiding in plain sight. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts below, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more true crime content. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories to light. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.